Welcome everybody. This is your Nature Journal Educator Forum with your co-hosts. Hi, I'm John Muir Laws, and that over there is
Is it me? I think it might be me.
sure, why
Hi,
not?
it's Billy Joe.
Well, actually, maybe it's over there. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I was like, and down here in my screen, we have the wonderful and the amazing.
Um, Yvan Moore, good to be with you all.
Hey, we're happy that you are here too. Joining our what was that what was it years ago that there's a television show about these the Brady Bunch, how at the start everybody would be in their little boxes kind of looking at each other. We kind of have that little dynamic going on. Hey there. So we Today what we wanted to do is have a follow-up conversation about last time's conversation. And That follow-up is going to be about discussing students in crisis and children in crisis, and how we can best serve them, and when to know when we're over our heads, and things for us to look out for. Let's talk about students in crisis. Um, I was teaching a class last year, and a student showed up. She was a teen and was with um, a person who I thought was a father, but there was uh, a big grown-up with her, who spoke for her. She was wearing dark glasses inside, and at one point, while gesturing, you could see that on her wrists there were cut marks, or what appeared to me to be the sort of marks you'd make if you're a cutter. Um, and uh, she also had some other bruises on her, and this it felt like sort of one of these kind of textbook cases of like there may be something going on with this person. And so what do you do? What um, is what's appropriate to do in the best interest of the student? How do we act appropriately without and sort of checking our assumptions? What are what are sorts of crises, crisis that people may be experiencing that we should have on our radar, so that we might be able to recognize um, something that could be going on. Um, should you recognize something like this, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? How can we sort of be aware of the limits of our own capacity and level of training? How do we bring in extra help if that's necessary? Depending on where you are, what are there positions where there's mandatory reporting of things that give you concern? And what can we do about our own human tendency to assume that everything is okay and things will probably be better if I don't get involved? All of those are on the table for our topic of discussion today. As educators, we are really interested in student welfare. We want what is best for kids, and because we're training ourselves to pay attention. I think that it is our ability to perhaps to notice things may be better. So we might be sort of the front line of people who notice a problem. We're not going to have all the answers today. We won't have even most of them, but I want us to start to be intentional about thinking about these things, and perhaps as a group come up with some strategies for awareness, for recognizing, and then what does our decision tree look like about what do we do then? What's appropriate to do? What's the right thing to do? Before we get started, I want to say that today's topic may bring up strong emotions. There could be people in this group, this conversation, who have seen or have personally experienced abuse and trauma. And if you do not feel like participating in the discussion, we give you full space not to. If you feel comfortable in this space, sharing anything with you, your experience with us, we respect and we appreciate that. And I just want to remind all of us that we want to treat each other with kindness, with dignity, and respect, and try as we can, as much as possible, to make this a safe space for us to have a conversation about some things that may be difficult. But again, I'm hoping that by, as educators, us sort of shining a light on this difficult area, that we'll be better able to do the right thing in the next real situation that presents itself to us. So with that, let's start with just a little bit of kind of personal reflection and insights. What I'd like you to do is to start off with a piece of paper, a little notebook, and just to do a brain dump, anything that is kind of on your mind about this topic. Try to get it out of your head and onto paper. And so you're going to initially just do a brain dump. You don't have to sort things. Things don't need to be in any order. And then what's going to happen in about 5 minutes is I'm going to invite people to take a look at your list and see if there are things on there that you think would be particularly helpful and useful to talk about with this group. We will then drop those into the chat, and we'll put them in at the same time. When we'll push the button at the same time, we'll drop those into the chat. We'll have a little bit of a group discussion, then break out into some small discussion rooms where we'll allow you to select what aspect of this you really want to dig into with other people. And again, if you choose to opt out of that, that is completely fine. And then we'll come back for one more big group discussion. So that's our plan for today. And I know we'll just scratch the surface of this topic, but I think with the wisdom and experience of people in this group, we're going to have some really useful insights that can help all of us be able to do this. But let's just do a little bit of a brain dump right now. Anything that's in your brain, get it onto paper. Otherwise, your brain's going to be like, oh, I don't want to lose track of that thought. Let's catch them right now while they're really fresh. We're going to take about 5 minutes. Let's do that now. I want to invite you to take a look at your list and see if there is a topic here. We have a number of ideas that we think would be fruitful for our community discussion here. But if there's a topic that appeared on your list that you're thinking to yourself like, ooh, wouldn't it be nice if we could spend some time with this community kind of throwing this idea around? That would be interesting. I want to invite you to type that into the chat. Don't hit send yet, but put that into the chat, and then we'll all do it at the same time. We'll see what comes of that. Are you ready? On 3, 1, 2, 3, hit send. Avea, would you be able to read this list to us?
Of course. Here we go. All right. Starting at the top, confounding / infuriating behavior can be a sign something is up. Ideas, process difference between school teacher and community educator. Collecting phone numbers / reporting resources in advance. You can make a big difference. Following up, staying connected if possible. Signs brainstorm, special considerations for neurodiverse students. What if reporting makes a situation worse? Creating a physically and emotionally safe place. Connecting yourself with helpers in your community who can provide advice or help to those in need. Expectations of maintaining professional boundaries versus students' needs for personal connection. So far, that's what we have. Oh, another one just came in. I would really strongly encourage us all to get training in MHFA mental health first aid in the same way as you wouldn't take a group of students into the wilderness without a first aider present. I do not think we should be taking our students into their inner wild without being prepared to administer mental health first aid and get that person into the hands of a professional, just as you would hand a person over to a doctor after administering physical first aid.
Ooh, all right. We've got some very useful thoughts here. And I want to kind of chunk some of these together. One is what do we want to have on our radar? What are things that we should be looking out for? Are there any sort of subtleties or signs that we can be made aware of? Another thing is to another kind of bin here is thinking about just sort of the how do we kind of this is a complex relationship. There is your professional position, there's your legal responsibility, there's what socially is sort of the way that you encounter this student. How do we balance those sorts of things? There's also the level of capacity. What are kind of have an intuitive sense of what am I equipped to deal with? What am I not equipped to deal with? As Sarah points out, what are kind of additional training that I might be able to get to help me to do with that? And what is the handoff when I'm over my head? What are resources that are out there to help me kind of navigate this? Why don't we start with a brief discussion of um, of things to have on our radar? Are there things that are there? Hold on a second. I'm trying to get my Zoom to, I want to see everybody's windows, but I can't. So I can't currently see if anybody's sort of raising a hand in the background. But let's, so if one of our other moderators could look for people physically raising their hand, you can use the raise hand function if you'd like to share something. Let's first just sort of talk about what are things that we should have on our radar that can put a kid into crisis? What are signs or symptoms that may be going on? So would love to hear from you all about your thoughts and ideas on that. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, we were adding Chris into, there we go.
Ah. Chris, thank you for.
I hope you can hear me. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Sometimes I can't be heard. I used to take kids up San Gorgonio like all summer long when I was in high school and college. And one of the things that I finally developed was I was Mother Nature, and I would look for the kids who were the right age and who maybe hadn't started a period because someone had to talk to them if anything happened. I found frequently that
Wait, your audio is breaking up. I'm going to suggest that you turn off your video and let's see if that improves
kind of
the.
hiking and looking at things.
Okay, so you're saying that some. You're saying that some of the kids they would not have had their period, and then I kind of lost your signal after that.
You're right. I was dealing with youngsters that were around that age and carried supplies, and also was able to talk to them and would pull them out away from the group. That kind of thing is important, that you carry it along and not make a big deal of it. Another thing I found was abuse to the kid. You've talked about that already, but any abuse on their person. I had students sometimes with cigarette burns, scars, foster care, any kind of a scar they couldn't explain or you doubted their explanation. And that also had to be carefully taken care of. And in those cases, I really did hand it off to the people in the community. Sometimes police, sometimes counselors. That's really, I mean, I have a ton of those little kinds of things that happen over.
I think we're losing your signal if you're still speaking.
No, I wasn't. I was
okay.
thinking of whether to go on. I mean, yeah. I had a student once who came into a room very riled up and angry and sat down and wrote a big
we're not hearing. Is it I'm going to see if it helps.
Someone with a pencil, and I've thought about it a lot. Okay, Ivea has it.
We didn't get most of that. Susan is suggesting that you perhaps type that into the chat. You're also talking about sort of you talked about sort of being aware that there may be girls who are having their first period or didn't bring any feminine hygiene products with them. They have a period while they're out on a trip with you, and they're going to need somebody to talk to. You also talked about physical abuse and looking for signs of that, such as a cigarette burn, which would be a round sort of circular burn on somebody's skin, scars or wounds or bruises that are difficult to explain. Bruises, I know from my EMT training, bruises on faces, and especially if there are different ages of bruises, then then that's another big sign. So bruises can be purple. Older bruises, as they break down, turn green. So if there's a mixture of ages of bruises, those are also things to have on our radar. You also talked about, I couldn't really get the message very well, but it sounded like you're saying that sort of unusual mood swings, sort of the person is perhaps very angry or perhaps really withdrawn, you notice something that is different from their baseline, maybe evidence of something going on.
Right. Correct.
Oh, now I hear you loud. No, okay.
Good. Correct. You're right. That's about it.
Excellent. So these are really great starting points for us. Chris, thank you so much for that. Let's bring Sarah in on this as well. Sarah, you can unmute. There we go.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm going to turn my speaker up more. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having this discussion. This is something that I
Wait, is it possible to go a little bit louder?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, just as you lean forward like that, your voice got louder. That was good.
yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yay! Awesome. Yeah, this is something that I feel very strongly about. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. So I just grabbed my purse because something that I always carry with me in my purse is this. It's the Assist Suicide Intervention Guide. Assist, I'm not sure whether they run it in the US, but it's a really, really good course that's run in the UK. I imagine it has something very similar in the US. It's something that I used to organise for my county's mental health provision for Mind, the mental health charity here in the UK. And it's a really great training about how to spot and speak to people in crisis. And the training that gives you an opportunity to do some role play, which is really helpful because it's one of those things that's really difficult to know what to say or how to approach things if it's totally new, you've never done it before. So, or maybe you have done it, but it was incredibly personal or a very emotive experience, and doing some role play allows you to explore what that could be in a safe environment. And one of the cool things about having a little card is it gives you some little prompts. So if you are feeling stuck or panicked or anything is going wrong, you can get this out and go through this with your person. So there's explore invitations, so things that could be signs, warning signs that we were talking about. It lists a few here. Giving away possessions, withdrawal from family, friends, school and work, loss of interest in hobbies, abuse of alcohol and drugs, reckless behavior, extreme behavior changes, impulsivity, self-harm. It goes on. I won't read you the whole thing, but it's a really good training, and I would just really highly recommend that more people do training, even if it's not something that you ever use in your classes, because this comes up all the time. It was when I work for Mind, suicide intervention was my main responsibility, coordinating that, and it was I was very busy, and I live in a very rural area where there is not a high population density. This affects a lot more people than you would think, and people don't talk about it with their loved ones because they don't want to hurt them. I don't know, and I don't like to make guesses, but I would assume, I would guess that many adults that come to nature journaling are coming because they are looking for some sort of peace, because they have things going on. And it may not be as extreme as suicide, but particularly for men, I know this is currently the biggest killer of men in the UK, more than physical health problems. So it is a really, really serious thing, and it is far more common than we would like to admit. So yeah, I just I just think it's really important to talk about this.
I
Thank you.
agree with you, and I didn't know that you had all that this training in this area. That's wonderful. It makes me think that yeah, just the importance of sort of wherever you are, finding a program like this and getting some experience with it. It sounds like the role play would be a wonderful way to do that. Because I think that a lot of the sorts of things, like I remember, hearing when I was doing an EMT training, they were talking about that, find out if, like, does this person says I'm going to kill myself, to ask them if they have a plan of how they're going to do it and when they're going to do it. And it sort of, to me, intuitively, it's like, no, you should never say that, because then they'll start planning it, right? But so there are these counterintuitive things that we that would not occur to me. And I think my instinct would be to do the wrong thing, which of course my instinct is to bury my head in the sand. And if we can we just ignore this a little bit longer, and then maybe it'll go away. So that sounds really, really useful and practical, and something that us educators should have on our radar. Thank you so much. Also, thank you so much for doing that work. And it's also interesting that after having done that training and worked doing that you still carry a little card in your wallet. So in that having a little checklist, having something that you can go back to in that tough situation. So that just sort of suggests to me again that this is stuff that is nuanced, and that kind of going with some support is really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even after, I mean, done this training, done a lot of this work with Mind, and also coordinated this training for my county, but I'm not a doctor. As far as I'm aware, none of us here are doctors. And the end goal is always to get the person that you are dealing with into the safe hands of a doctor or a professional person. That the main thing that you should always do during these conversations is it's called contract a safe plan, which is a funny way of saying, what are we going to do to make sure that you are going to be safe until we get you into the hands of somebody that can genuinely help you. Because I think you mentioned earlier about knowing when we're in over our heads. And I would say that we are always in over our heads. It doesn't matter how good a person you are, or even if you've been through something similar on a personal level, that might just make you even more vulnerable yourself. And you mustn't damage yourself in the process of trying to help somebody else. So I would say always know that you're in over your head, and always know who the people are, where your contact centers are locally, where you can get this person to as quickly as possible if you come up against a crisis, if that makes sense.
That makes lots of sense. So, you also are reminding us that this is something that is so much more common than anybody talks about, right? Saw in the chat that, so this is the number one killer of men in the UK. Probably in the United States, it's going to be a similar sort of thing. Here in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the South Bay, we've had a rash of child suicides, kids in high pressure schools standing on the railroad tracks. And once that became a thing to do, and people kind of recognized that, there were more sort of copycats of that. And so the this is real, and this may be things that we if we have the ability to identify it, we may be able to intervene for the better. Avea, what does this get you thinking about?
If it's helpful, I was going to add just some more signs to look for in students.
Please, absolutely.
So some of these signs will be things that by them, like that they have, it depends on the context. Sometimes they won't be, but sometimes they will be. So it's important to pay attention, in my opinion. Notice if this is a kid, especially who you see regularly, notice if they regularly appear maybe without lunch or food, or maybe who regularly haven't eaten breakfast. Just pay attention to that. Sometimes that can be by the kid's own choice, and sometimes it may not be. Notice too whether or not they wear the same clothing every day without changing it, or for that matter, if their hygiene is really off. It could be signs as well. And if they appear regularly kind of unkempt, or if they show any signs, rumpled clothing or maybe dirt or something like that or maybe really cold skin of having slept outside. Especially if you arrive at a location very early and find that they're already there in front of the school. I'm saying these, by the way, from personal experience as the kid who is that kid. So these are the signs that people could have seen in me that might have helped. Also, because this is nature journaling, that makes it even more important to read over a kid's journal, because a kid might actually blatantly write something about their situation or I did that so many times in either my school assignments or my tests. But
So you were writing kind of calls for help
in my work regularly.
in your work.
Yeah. One
And
time,
people either didn't read those or chose to just say like, oh, that's a metaphor.
or just didn't respond.
Or yeah.
I mean, I wrote on the back of one of my papers about somebody who was abusing me, and it never got a response. Anyway, one person at one point did, in one particular circumstance, they came to check on me, but it was about somebody who was very minor in my life. So read your kids' work, because they might outright ask for help in their writing. And it also is their way of checking to see if anybody's paying attention. And the more people don't pay attention, then the more they realize that nobody's going to help them but themselves. Let's see here. Notice a kid, as we mentioned before, who's more withdrawn. Could be that they're an introvert, but could be that they, especially if they avoid eye contact a lot. Again, that could be a kid who maybe is not comfortable with eye contact, either from being an introvert or maybe from being a bit neurodiverse. But if a kid is avoiding eye contact, or if their eyes kind of dart around, or if they seem to kind of if their body language kind of goes in a bit on themselves, again, it could be shyness, but it could be also, especially if they're really reluctant to talk about their home life. In some cases, it could be that they're worried that if they talk about it, then they'll get more in trouble, which is unfortunately, if we handle it right, it's not, but sometimes, never mind. But yeah, those are some ideas.
Those are some really useful things to look out for. Just while we're adding to this sort of list of signs and symptoms, another thing that seems to appear a lot in abuse cases is that my understanding is that electric cords are often used as a tool to beat children. So if you see a mark on somebody's back, a loop, as if somebody took an electric cord and struck another person with it, that's a really big red flag. And with infants, also a burn that would be caused by dipping part of a body into hot water. So that you'd look for kind of a line on the body, either on the bottom or on a foot or on an arm, where part of a body was dipped into hot water. Yes.
One more. Also signs of, we already talked a little bit about self-harm, It also might be the case that if a child was harmed by somebody in a way that didn't leave marks, they might harm themselves in a way that does, as a cry for help. Because maybe their abuser hurt them in a way that didn't leave marks, and so they might feel that it's less legitimate, or that people might just tell them, oh, well, that person didn't leave a mark.
Yeah.
And so if they leave marks on themselves, that could also be a way of crying for help.
Thank you. This is sobering. Star. Thank you for being here in this conversation with us.
Yeah, this is such a great conversation. I think that Ivea and Sarah covered a lot of territory for us, but it's what just came to mind as Ivea was talking. I had a young Vietnamese girl, and she was one of the refugee boat people, and they use some of you probably know they use a process called cupping, and it goes, so you see these red circles on the skin, and one of her teachers, and she didn't have much of any English at all, dragged her out of class, took her to the office, thought she was an abused child. She wasn't abused. It was cupping is a medical procedure that's done in Asian medicine, and it was, so I guess the lesson for me about that was to know what the heck I'm talking about before I start taking action. But I think any sign of change needs to be looked at. So it doesn't really, I don't think it really matters whether it's a child really acting out or a child all of a sudden going really quiet, or an adult for that matter. I think adults aren't so different from children in this, but if you're with somebody on a regular basis in a setting that stays pretty stable, and if their pattern changes, their patterns of socialization, whatever, if you start to see patterns, it's a red flag. And then, so you see it, but what do you do? Well, I think you build for that moment all through your relationship. You really have to be the trusted adult, because if you're not the trusted adult, it's whatever you try to do really isn't going to work very well. So how you interact with your students day in and day out, that you're the person who can be counted on, that you do what you say you're going to do, that you can keep a confidence, all these things that build a solid relationship, then that, I think, is what helps when the moment of crisis comes. And if you're teaching, you're going to have those moments. I mean, it is very prevalent. How are you not going to have it? Unless you do want to run away from it, which is a very normal response. And I think probably the most common response. But if you think you can help, it is a really good idea to know what the resources are that are available to you from the get-go, right from the beginning. And sometimes, like school systems, sometimes will give that to you. Sometimes they won't give it. So you have to dig yourself. And Eva mentioned to watch writings. And I think one other time we talked about keeping, I used to keep journals with my high schoolers that they could write in, and I would write in answer to them. These were ungraded journals, but they were always available. They were always using them. And even with limited English, it's amazing what they would put there that they wouldn't talk about. Journals are really, I mean, I think it's one of the reasons I love nature journaling. I have so much respect for what happens within the journal. And I think artwork too, if you have somebody who expresses themselves best that way, you're going to see things. You're going to see changes. Maybe all of a sudden everything gets very dark. I remember taking a kid to see his counselor because everything turned black that he did. He became an artist. He actually grew up and became an artist. But the signals with this young man, it was definitely in his artwork. Probably the most powerful thing that I found was to make home visits, and that's maybe not possible for everybody. I was working in an urban setting. It wasn't necessarily a safe thing to do, but all the time. But I always had another adult with me, and often a translator. And you learn more looking into somebody's home than you're ever going to learn in a formal classroom setting. And so if and when that's possible, that is absolutely the best way to get to know somebody. And then when you know them, you know how to help, you know where to get help. Sadly, I think today there's there's a real lack of resources, at least well, I think it's a national problem. I think there is a lack of resources, and so you just have to be very creative about it. But that glimpse into family life tells you so much more than what you see with just the individual. So if you get the chance, that's my hot tip for the day. So I think everything else was beautifully covered that I had on my mind. Thank you.
And in order to be able to catch that change in behavior, right, being more withdrawn or more that change, then really paying attention to what is a student's baseline.
Yeah.
You've talked to us in the past about the importance of paying attention to that individual and
Yeah.
being really present with them. It takes that. So time spent getting to know our students allows us to be the person who can then pick up when there is a change. And I like what you said about building that relationship over time, becoming someone that they can trust. You show up as, just, the fact that you regularly show up when you say you show up makes a difference, that you do what you say you're going to do. In that, something to be wary of is that we want to be somebody who does what we say we do. If a student asks me, can you keep a secret?
Mhm.
This is, I let people know that I can't keep a secret. I can keep a surprise, right? If you're planning a birthday party. But in a secret, a secret, if this is something that if then sort of following through on doing what you said you were going to do means that you're not going to tell anybody, you're not going to get help for this person if this is over your head. If somebody says, can you keep a secret? And you realize for their safety, you have to break that confidence. That puts you in a very difficult situation. So
Yeah.
when people have asked me if I can keep a secret, I often say that I explain that my goal is to be of the greatest help that I can. If there was something that I found that you told me that I felt that I needed to go to somebody else to protect you or to protect somebody else,
Yeah.
I have to do that. But so you can have a conversation about like what, but I'm here, I care about you, I'm authentic. And when I have had those conversations, people have gone, huh, I'm going to tell you, right? Because it's authentic.
Mhm. And because you're demonstrating that you can be trusted,
That's right.
that's a
That's right.
demonstrate
You're
that
demonstrating that,
you're
like, even in
trusted.
this,
Yeah.
that you can trust me to tell you the truth on this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I see that Rose is here, and I wanted to give you a chance to speak, but I wanted I've had some more thoughts about something that Avea shared with us, and I wanted to bounce back to that. And Avea, if you feel comfortable, if you want to be off screen, you can. If you want to come back on, you can. I talking about this stuff is hard, and it's uncomfortable for us. And I think that part of my sort of initial response when I'm hearing these sorts of things and or picking up on something is to, I think there's part of my brain that just doesn't want it to be real, and so I don't act. And you just in describing some of these things to look out for, you said that these are things that happen to you, and you were telling us about your personal experience. And then I carried on just as if like, oh, there was a conversation, you're listing things, and I didn't respond to that. I apologize to you for that. And I'm also sorry that that happened to you. That is horrible. And I really appreciate you sharing that very personal thing with us. And I'm sorry for then just sort of going on with the rest of the conversation. But how wrong for that to be something that happened to you, to anyone. And thank you so much for being able to share those experiences with us.
Thank you for listening. And also, while I accept your apology, you don't have to apologize for that. I didn't feel that you weren't listening, and you have shown me so much compassion over the years. I was talking about things that happened as a child, but you, all of you, but I know especially you, Jack, have shown me a lot of compassion for the things that happened as an adult. So I didn't for a minute feel that you weren't listening or that you were glossing over what I said. And I share this because we're talking about signs to look for in kids, and because I think it will be helpful. Because I know that if I have these signs, then other kids will too. And I am largely free of, of course, we've got a few extra things to work through, but I'm largely free of the abuse that happened to me as a kid. And I'm free of that. So I can share this as a survivor. So I really appreciate to all of you listening. This is something that I worry about being overwhelming for people to hear. And so I feel like in this space, we can share it and process it together. And my feelings are dealt with. Nobody's got to worry about my feelings in this. So thank you all for making the space, and thank you especially, Jack. Thank you. How about after Rosa? Would it be okay if after Rosa, then I can read some of the chat because there have been some good ideas?
Please.
Excellent.
Rosa, thank you for being with us.
Hi. Gosh, this is a very emotional topic for so many of us. Ivana, I know that sharing what you did will help other children. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was great.
And I wanted to bring up something from my own life. When I was 15, I went to a teacher and said, I'm going to run away from home. And I told her because I didn't want her to worry. Bless my heart, right? That child. And she listened to me. And I don't know what her actual legal responsibility is, but she didn't turn me in to anybody. What she said to me was, do you have a plan? Are you about to do this? And I, was dumbfounded and was like, and she said, can you give me a few days? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she came back within about 2, and she asked if I wanted to go to college early. And I said, oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, I would like to go to college early. And that's what happened for me. But I have thought so many times, particularly now, about what happens when kids turn up and say, I'm going to run away from home, or I want to run away from home. As educators of school-age children, I'd like to bring up the topic of knowing what resources to provide when that happens, because it must, right? And I feel so grateful that I had a teacher I trusted as much as I did her, and that things worked out well for me. And I see the teachers that I have had when I show up here in this community, the kindness and compassion and intent here is extraordinary. So I just wanted to say that out loud, what a wonderful group this is.
Mm.
And one idea that I've brought up before, and I'd like us to come back to it perhaps as a group to brainstorm. I'd like to see us develop some resources, perhaps zines, I'm not sure, where we pair some nature journaling exercises with some very like introductory level, straightforward cognitive behavioral therapy exercises. Nothing too, like enormous that's gonna, break open the floodgates, but like little things like grounding, and how the experience of, putting your feet in the grass and just being, right, can bring you some peace. Or how when we go around and you look for what you can see, taste, touch, feel, and smell, that can be a nature journaling prompt for what are my senses telling me. But it's also an extraordinarily valuable thing to do if you're spiraling emotionally and you need to like grab onto the present moment so that you're staying here instead of, whatever you're worrying about or whatever you're ruminating on. Those are just a couple, but I'm sure we could come up with more. And I think if we had something that was really, low key, that wasn't about like, here's how to deal with your mental health crisis with nature journaling, but instead was just like, oh, hey, this thing you're doing, this hobby you've picked up, has some correspondences to things that you might come across in a therapeutic setting, and maybe, with some footnotes or other resources. So I have been cogitating on this. I'd love for us to, as a group, come up with something like this, because I think the first couple of zines we have are so great. And as we've said, those of us who come to nature journaling often have some thread of seeking that has brought us to it. And so if we just keep creating more resources to help people when they find us.
I wonder if we could get a little team together to explore this topic, and then we could have maybe one of our education forums on that idea. Evan, do you have any experience in that?
I was thinking the same thing. I was going to specifically ask Rosa if you and I could work together, you with your CBT, me with my DBT, and anybody else who'd like to join in. And I wish I could do the hearts like Jack. I'm so envious.
I don't know how to turn my auto hearts off. It is like, and if I also do this, then every once in a while it makes me look like I'm thinking about thumbs up. I can't stop it. I tried. I can't. I don't know how to. It's something new in my operating system. But I have to be really careful not to do this. Or things. Fortunately, that's not a gesture that I make very often, but I don't know how to turn all that business off. I'm sorry. That's a distraction. But I would love, would the two of you guys, or if anybody else wants to be kind of in on that discussion, that would be, that would be an educator forum that would be incredible. And another, this also ties into Star. It's an interesting coincidence that you happen to be on the screen right now, because I was, so Star's just written a book about the connection between nature journaling and spiritual practices. And there also are connections between spiritual practices and therapeutic practices. What is this? What's your thinking about this, Star? And also, Star, what do you think when your book is out, we do an educator forum about spirituality, and you could lead us in a discussion about what you're doing. But I think there's some interesting kind of connections between the work that you're doing and nature journaling and therapy.
Yeah, and I'm married to a psychologist. A minister and a psychologist. So Yeah, it's an interesting household. I'd love to help if I could help, Ivea and Rosa. If I can help, I will. Yeah, I think a lot of people are using nature journaling for their just their well-being. You can call it spirituality, you can call it mental health, whatever, but for their well-being. And so I wanted to write the book because I really want to connect the communities that I love, this community, with my mindfulness community, the community of Thich Nhat Hanh, and with the spiritual directors community. I'm a spiritual director, so it's such a natural. If I sit and meet with someone, very quickly in our relationship, they'll start telling me, oh, the place where I feel closest to whatever, spirit, God, whatever, is when I'm out on my kayak or when I'm hiking the mountains, but it's a nature connection. And so I just think we don't explore this very much, or we don't give people many tools. So my idea in writing about it was to dive more deeply, not, into that, and hope that I can just get people to see those connections, to use them, to go deeper, and ultimately to just love this precious planet and do better in our role as human beings, which I don't think we're doing real well right now. So I think that for me, one of the reasons I want to be helping people to make a deeper connection is so that they will understand that they are part of the natural world and that they need to act that way. They need to act responsibly. So that's just my personal quest.
Mhm.
um, and I'm very hopeful. The book is in the last stages of editing now, and it'll come out. It's not a long book, but I think it hits on some, I hope, encouraging topics, and we'll just, I'd like people to think of this as a practice, not as a hobby. It's fine if hobby works for some people. I'm not putting that down, but to see nature journaling as a practice, is something you do, like some people might say their morning prayers, but I wake up and think about what's going to go in my journal, or what can I read about, or the poem I want to write to put in my journal. It's a practice. It's a mindfulness practice. And so I'm just excited to see nature journaling that way, and I want to share it and hope it serves. Is that helpful, Jack? You know
That is
exactly
helpful.
what you wanted.
No. But this process for well-being, right? This is a big reason a lot of people do come to nature journaling, and it works. And I also wonder if sometimes, if we've got all of our defenses up and we're kind of going through our day, then we get out into nature and have the reflective tool of journaling. We may be surprised at kind of when we're able to relax a little bit, kind of at what comes out. And so
Yeah.
that's why that might make, for some people, their sort of the crisis that they're going through more emergent,
Oh, it might.
because the pressure is off a little bit. They have the ability to actually think about and to feel what is going on.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time running away from ourselves,
Ah,
we do. And if you're journaling with your whole heart and your mind, you're not going to be running away from yourself anymore. So yeah, I think it could bring things up for people. But you have to believe that's better than always running away from your reality, you know.
Or
You
else,
can't fix what you don't face.
exactly, you can't heal what you don't feel. Or other
That's
times,
right.
we get into survivor's mindset, which for some of us, we feel what we're going through acutely, but for others of us, in that moment of crisis, we can suppress a lot of the feelings and just focus on doing the next thing that leads to
Mhm,
survival or success. And we might
mhm.
remain in that shut down or even dissociated state until we have a chance to actually sit down and connect with our heart selves and our journals. And then and then it's like, oh
Mhm.
my goodness, then how much it comes out. And it can be really frightening. But
Yeah.
so
Very important though, Eva, you know, and it's one of the promises of nature journaling, I think. One of the sections in my book is on poetry, different forms of poetry, haikus and lanterns and all these, you know, because it's easy if people don't know how to write poems, but it's a good doorway because it is, I mean, our emotional life is right out there. It, hopefully. And if we're able to capture that in our journal as we're relating to whatever we're seeing in front of us, you know, really. And that's another big concern of mine is accessibility. You know, I'm lucky where I live, but not everybody is. But to find ways for this, and I try to address that, to find ways to do this practice wherever you are, whoever you are. You know, and if your hands aren't steady and you can't draw and you can't do that anymore, then maybe you can do photography or maybe you can make a collage or you know, but we have to, if we want to keep a really big tent, we have to be flexible. So,
ooh, or maybe if you have trouble with your hands, then you can do one of those things as the facilitator where you record people saying out loud what
yes,
their nature stories, so that if we can't
yes,
use our hands, we can still use our voices.
yes, definitely.
Do you mind if I don't want to completely change the subject, but I just want to jump back to something that Rosa was saying, if that's all right?
Please.
Sure.
Okay. And Rosa, if you don't feel comfortable answering this, you don't have to. But I was wondering, when you shared about when you talked to your teacher about how you said that you wanted to run away, and she said, give you a couple of days. If you don't mind my asking, what were some of the things in that experience you had with her that helped you to feel safe? Like what happened about that interaction that wound up being really healthy for you and successful?
Huh. Um, well, she took me completely seriously. And she believed that it was possible. I was 15, and in Louisiana at the time, you could already have a driver's license, which I did. And I had a job at the library. So I had, you know, not a lot of money, but it seemed like a fortune to me at the time, a couple $100s, right? And she didn't laugh. Like she didn't betray any sense of like, oh my God, child, no, you know, um, but was like, oh, you know, and I don't know that she literally said, tell me more, but she, you know, got me talking more. It was an unhappy home situation that I was trying to get away from. And, you know, going to college early solved the problem. Um, I was also, you know, frustrated and unhappy at my high school, but I don't think I would have tried to run away on account of that. Um, you know, she saw what would work for me. That would not be the right answer for most kids who show up saying they're going to
Yeah.
run away, right? um it was an unusual solution to my problem, but it also made me feel 1,000% seen, right? Like she got that, like I wasn't trying to get away from school. I was trying to get away from what was making me so unhappy. um so those are the things that I can recall from it. It's still a very visceral feeling. I could, you know, like I could see the blackboard.
Mhm.
You know, I was standing at her desk after class. And in my mind, I was just letting her know, you know, so that when I didn't show up, you know, she quote unquote wouldn't worry. I'm 52
Yeah.
now. I was like, oh my
Oh.
God. Um,
Wow. Do you
but
remember the teacher's name?
yes. Her name was Chris Daigle.
Chris.
Daigle, Daigle.
So
And I should get in touch with her. I
I
am in
encourage
touch
you to
with
do that.
teachers who probably still are in touch with her, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. No,
Because she should know how that all worked out. I mean, she did know that I got to LSU, and you know, I used when I still lived in Louisiana, I would go back and visit the high school. And gosh, I mean, I used to just wander onto campus, right? And like, can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to
It would
bring that
mean the
part up.
world to her.
yeah, I encourage you to reach out to Chris Daigle. And Chris Daigle, the community here of educators, is sending a shout out to you for
Absolutely.
that was a that was a wonderful example of how to really pay attention to
Mhm.
somebody.
Yeah.
And be authentic and be useful, and that's powerful.
And you brought up the asking if you have a plan, right? Like,
Yes.
she just flat out asked me, and I had this, like, you know, I have a car and some money. That's not a plan. Which I think she kind of said something like, you know, not to put me down, but that, like, oh, okay, so you're not leaving after school today.
Yeah.
And I was like,
And phrasing it like,
no.
can you give me a few days? What a wonderful way of just sort of saying, let's put a hold on this. And I'm doing something actively. I heard you. And a request from her for you to give her a few more days to be there and be present with you and to work on this with you.
Yeah, I mean,
That
that
was,
meant the entire world.
yeah.
That I had her assistance in that. And so, you know, being someone your students can come to with something as scary as I need to not be at home anymore,
Yeah.
is an incredible gift.
Can I also say on that thought of how teachers respond? I found that even if teachers don't always know exactly what to do, the ones who care enough to listen or who show compassion can still make that difference in even a little way. Because then you feel seen, or you feel validated, or you feel like there's one adult out there who's not judging you for
Yeah.
something that's out of your control. So that's another thing too, is even if your teacher doesn't know quite what to do, the ones who actually care and show it can also mean a lot to a student who is struggling.
I would like to give us an opportunity to drop into some little breakout rooms for a bit to play with some ideas with each other. And one way we can do this is I'm creating some breakout rooms. And I thought what I could do is I've thought of three big categories, and maybe you folks can help me see if there's any other categories we need. One category would be if we want to just be in a space to share some kind of related stories. There's a story that is on your mind that you want to share, or to listen to other people's stories or experiences around this. There will be a story room. Another might be a room where we could talk about somebody comes to you, and what are things we want to kind of bear in mind about how we respond in that moment. So your response as a teacher. And a third category of just sort of logistics and laws and resources, and kind of a nuts and bolts room. And let people choose which room they wanted to go into. Are there any other sort of big topics that might be good? Again, I had one room that's a story room. Another room is you're in a teacher position, somebody comes to you. What are some things we want to be thinking about in our response? And another room where we're talking about logistics, laws, and resources. Does that sound good? And not seeing in the chat any other ideas, I'm going to open these 3 rooms. Let's see, what time is it now? Let's take maybe 15 minutes in this conversation room. We may find we need more and we can do that another time. But and then we'll come back for and if there's anybody in one of those rooms who would like to report out some of the conversation when we get back, that might be kind of a good way to bring this discussion to a close. Before we do that, I really want to thank everybody here who has shared their thoughts, comments, ideas, and personal experiences. Rosa, thank you for telling us that story about Chris. What was Chris's last name?
Daigle, D-A-I-G-L-E.
Chris Daigle. I really hope you can find Chris.
I have my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I'm still in touch with it's a whole nother story, but the guy who was my vice principal in middle school, who ended up being the state superintendent of education in Louisiana. I think he might be able to help me find Chris.
That would be great. Good. People are coming in and joining us. I'm glad you all found us again. I had let's just kind of go around, and I would love to hear if there are any insights that you had from rooms that you were visiting, or if there were or if you have kind of what for you is kind of now an important thought that you wanted to share. Let's start with Laramie, and I'm going to spotlight you here, and thank you so much for being with us.
Of course. I was in the response breakout room, and I was with Sarah and Ivea and a couple others, and I know that they're still coming into the room, so I'll just briefly summarize what we talked about. We kind of created an approach where we had a situation and kind of scaffolded a situation and described what appropriate responses would be to that. And one of the things, the situation was kind of about, a father and a son and a difficult dynamic between the two. And the kind of insight that came from that is that sometimes parents might actually be struggling with feeling overwhelmed or inadequate or embarrassed, or there might be a variety of things that are contributing to behaviors that between them and others and them and their children, and that having, in addition to resources about other types of mental health services, having things that might help them feel seen and heard. This came from Sarah and Ivea, which I thought was really insightful. And it looks like they're back in the room now. But Ivea mentioned the talk line for parent support that she had heard about. And it seemed like a really great resource for instances where it seems like the parent is experiencing overwhelm, and helping the parent might help to resolve certain issues that maybe are more minor.
That's really useful to have a resource to give to parents, because then that might also be able to help treat part of the cause rather than a symptom.
Mm-hmm.
in our group, there's discussion of kind of you know, is there a card or one that you can make to have with you to be able to give somebody resources? And it might be useful to have a card that has stuff for parents, has stuff for teens, has a number of those resources on it. So you're not just saying, you know, like, you should look up, I think there's a website about that. That's really wise, Laramie. Thank you for that. Are there other folks who had ideas or thoughts that you wanted to share from the group? And or your own insights on this. Okay, so I've got the second half of my story. I started off this workshop describing a situation. And here's what happened, and here's what we did. So in the moment, sort of seeing this person who I thought, here's somebody in crisis. I did nothing. Initially, I did nothing. I was paralyzed, thinking somebody ought to do that. Oh yeah, that somebody is me. What is the right time to do that? What is the right thing to do? How do I handle that? And I did nothing. And then that person left the program for the day. And then I realized I needed to have done something. That was the place that you actually did something. And I still didn't know what that was. And so I sat down with the staff at the Nature Center where I was teaching this class and said, like, all right, here's what really concerns me. And we should have had this conversation at lunch so that person was still here. And I said that, all right, that I noticed these, you know, these clues that this person might be in an abusive situation. And what do we need to do about that? And at first everybody said, oh, I don't know. And we all kind of looked around and we didn't know what to do. There wasn't a plan in place. There weren't protocols. And fortunately, this was somebody who sometimes came into programs there. They knew this family and they would be back, and they decided that the next time that person comes back, the woman who worked at the Nature Center would take that young woman aside and ask if she was safe, if you know these sorts of things, and also hand her some resources if she thought she needed those. That was the plan that we came up with, and it seemed to be reasonable. But that just sort of it highlights to me the importance of thinking about this stuff in advance, because otherwise, again, I don't want to be in that situation where I watch the person leave my program and then I have the mental space to go, oh, I think that was where I should have done something. And so that, I guess, is my kind of the thoughts that I'm left with. What I think I'm going to do now, my personal next steps, is I'm going to find some telephone numbers and I'm going to do some research on what are some resources specifically for sort of teen crisis, for suicide, for parents who are feeling overwhelmed, and maybe make myself a little card that I could have with me, and that I could be able to give to people, but this, I think, is sort of the start of a larger process of thinking of what is the best way for us to respond in situations that will be nuanced and difficult. Before we close here today, I want to check in with you folks to see how you are feeling, what you are thinking, and if anybody else has any other ideas or thoughts that they wanted to share, perhaps things that came out of your discussion. And I'm going to bring on the mad botanist. Hey there, Vea.
Hey there, it's good to see you all. Thank you all so much for being here today and for talking about the subject and for having the bravery to talk about something heavy and also necessary. I think that the saddest thing about this is part of why we carry this is because this is reality of our world, and that's the painful thing, isn't it? Is that this happens. Things that I wanted to say are, if folks have resources, please email them to me, because in our program description, I want to make sure to include all of those links, because I guarantee that folks who watch this later will want to know that too. They're going to want to look at those links. And so I want to have as many as possible so that people can immediately begin taking action as they like. I also want to reassure folks that this is difficult, this situation. And also, if you don't always know what to do, or if you can't always act in a situation, then don't give up. Keep on figuring out what we can do. And also know that even if there's nothing you can do in an exact situation, just asking the student how you are, or showing that you care, and that you see them, sometimes even that little bit is something. Sometimes there'll be situations where we can't act because either we don't know how, or because what we're seeing is not, enough on the radar for organization to get involved, or because somebody's home life might get worse. And that's a hard thing. And so as a community, that means that not just as a community of educators, but as an entire society, that's on not just you, that's on all of us to work on. And so don't hold it so much as your own burden if you can't. I know that that's not easy to say, because we hold on anyways because we care, but try to go gentle on yourself, okay? Try to go gentle on yourself.
That's wise. Let's do the best we can with what we have. And the more intentional we are about that, the more we think ahead about it, the better we'll be able to make those decisions. But you're so right. This is nuanced. This is difficult. And let's do the best we can with what we have and who we are. And I think it also, it helps me sort of preloading this in my brain. I think that perhaps because of having this conversation with all of you, that I will perhaps be a little bit better able to make a good decision in a difficult situation in the future.
I admire that you brought up to your fellow staff, like, what to do so that you all could have a conversation. And that works for us as educators to talk to each other about how to do, but then also the more we talk to like I said before, about all of society, that means not just us as educators, it means whether it's the police, whether it's social services, whether it's other counselors, whether it's other teachers, whether it's the system, whether it's the parents, whether it's the organizations who are a little scarier. It's everybody. It's not supposed to be following on only one person. Community caretaking is a community responsibility. So if nothing else, we can help other people in those different positions in our society talk about it too, until it becomes everybody being responsible. It's too heavy for just one person.
That's so wise. And with that, dear friends, we're really grateful for you being here with us today. This, as Susan has mentioned in the chat, this is a really tough discussion. But something perhaps to have hope out of this is that it is a tough discussion, but we're having those tough discussions. And we're not alone in caring. We're not alone in this community of people who are trying to do the best we can with what we have. to try to make this life better for each other. I really agree with what Evea said, is that we are part of a community. So the next time that I'm in this situation, I'm going to have all of you behind me. And that will help me make a good decision or a better decision in a difficult situation.
I just wanted to say something before we go, which is this has been a really heavy topic, and I wanted to remind people to be intentional about taking a little time to maybe ground or recenter. I think we were reminded of the existence of some really terrible people in the world who do awful stuff, and of young people in crisis who we want to help, and it's all very kind of agitating. And so taking a moment to take care of ourselves is probably in order, and I wanted to speak up about that.
Rosa, that is really smart. Star, would you be willing to lead us in a short guided meditation to end our meeting with?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
So on that, Rosa, we happen to
We
have
have an expert.
We have an expert in that. And what I'm going to do is a little bit after will you be using that bell again?
If you like.
Well, I'd like to. What we'll do is the second time you hit it when you hit it at the end, I'll just let that sound ring out for a little while, and shortly after that, without saying anything, we'll be ending this meeting.
Okay.
But we just all want to let everybody know we are grateful that you are here. We are grateful to be in this community with you, and thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of others and this planet.
So this will be a brief loving kindness meditation, which will put us in our heart centers. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy, wise, and free. May this community be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be happy, wise, and free. May those who are suffering be filled with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be peaceful and at ease. May they be happy, wise, and free. May the universe be filled with loving kindness. May all be well. May all be peaceful and at ease. May all be happy, wise, and free.